Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our channel. I'm your host, the HOD of the PSP, and welcome to the third installment of the CAF Champions League Road, episode 3 here, and we're getting to preview the action from round 2 of the Champions League of Africa, of course, a round that will kick off on Tuesday with 6 matches set to be played. Of course, one match is postponed in Group C, of course, and on Wednesday it will be one match to take place, and that is from Group B. Of course, before we start, like, share, comment on the video, subscribe to the channel, enable notifications to receive all the updates from these episodes on the Pitchside podcast episodes and other content on the channel. Follow us on social media, site PSP on Twitter, Pitchside Pod on Instagram, and of course you can listen to this on Spotify, Google Podcasts, or any other platform according and alongside the other episodes of the podcast. We're going group by group here, and we're starting from Group A. Of course, it will be Al-Merrikh from Sudan versus Vita Club from Congo, and Simba from Tanzania versus Al-Ahly from Egypt. Of course, the current defending and reigning defending champions in this competition, Al-Ahly. Of course, let's start with Al-Merrikh versus Vita Club. Of course, Al-Merrikh lost 3-0 against Al-Ahly in the first game in Egypt. It was a pretty it was a disappointing, I think, performance. I didn't get to talk about that game, of course, because it was separate and it was played at a later date to the first round. But Al-Ahly pretty much dominated, and they had a strong showing in that game, really. 3-0. It was a convincing victory. In the first half, the game was a bit so-so in terms of the performance. I mean, it was almost 50-50, it felt, at a certain point in the first half, but in the second half it was going one-sided way, really. Al-Ahly dominated that game, and they won again by a comfortable margin, 3-0 against Al-Merrikh, a convincing showing from the champions. But for Al-Merrikh side hosting Vita Club, and Vita Club have their own problems, of course, losing to Simba in the first game. It doesn't bode well for either club, of course. It looks like these two are going to be vying for the second place unless Simba causes a trouble in the other game against Al-Ahly, or in general in the group. But it looks like it's going to be between those two clubs, Al-Merrikh and Vita Club, for the second place of this group. And I hope, really, we see quite the tense competition for that spot. We don't want a boring group where Al-Ahly just goes and runs with everything and in that group and wins 18 points or something. But still, Al-Merrikh showed good defensive resilience in the first half, but they dropped physically. This is where the problem is going to come. If that doesn't happen against Vita Club, a side who has the potential to upset them and go quick on them in the counter-attack, despite the fact that they lost again in the first game against Simba, again, that's a different ball game. Al-Merrikh are not going to be sitting in the back like they did against Al-Ahly. Obviously, they're going to be trying to attack more, score early maybe, try and make the game as comfortable as it sounds, and as they want to, because they have the opportunity to score. For sure, they play at home. Maybe they won't have a strong home advantage of crowds and all, but again, that might not make a difference in any way, shape, or form in the final result of the game. In the other game of the group, Simba versus Al-Ahly, reportedly this game is going to be played with 30,000 fans in attendance, and that is quite shocking to hear. I'm not sure about this information, really, but if that is correct, this is going to be a heck of advantage for Simba. Al-Ahly and all, I think, African clubs haven't played in front of crowds for a while now, and it will be a different ball game for real for Al-Ahly. I mean, they played the FIFA Club World Cup against crowds, but not exactly the raucous 30,000 that you would expect in a country like Tanzania, and against a club like Simba. I watched them on Instagram. Simba, sometimes they post live streams of their matches. They actually have some crowds. Like, the stadium is quite filled most of the time, even in this COVID raging pandemic going on in the world. So that might play into the game of some sorts, but still, I think Al-Ahly are going to be too strong for them. The victory against Vita Club, not a fluke by any chance. They had a terrific defensive performance in that game, and they won via a penalty. They took their chances. They won via penalty again. It wasn't exactly the most outstanding of victories, but still, it's an important victory, and it will be pretty interesting to watch watch how Al-Ahly are going to be responding to the first game against Al-Merrikh. Would they go on the same momentum? Would Simba try to put a stone in their shoes, metaphorically, and try to hurdle them? Would they be enough of a force to disrupt the momentum of the Egyptian and the African, of course, champion, third placed in the last FIFA Club World Cup, who entered this competition with so much momentum behind them and so much favoritism for them to win it for the 10th time? It will be their La Decima if they do it this season around. Of course, before we go, remind you of the standings in this group. Of course, the first group, Al-Ahly, of course, and Simba 3 points each. They meet. Vita Club and Al-Merrikh with the 0 points. Of course, they meet as well, and we'll see how things are going to be going after this second round. Again, I favour Al-Merrikh and Al-Ahly, the home side in the first game, and the second, I favour the away side, really, to get with the 3 points. I think this is going to be straightforward, unless football has something in store for me. From Group A, and we move on, of course, chronologically, as we mentioned, group by group, that is, not by the time slots. We move to Al-Hilal, Oumdurman, TP Mazembe, CR Belouizdad, and Mamelodi Sundowns. It is Group B, and a big factor, I think, in this group is the fact that Belouizdad are going to be playing their game in a different stadium. They chose to play in Tanzania because the COVID restrictions in Algeria are not allowing South Africans, of course, because of the second strain of coronavirus and what have you. And Tanzania allows that, apparently, so the game is going to be played there, and that is going to be interesting, really, to watch from that perspective. But before that game, which is going to be played apparently at 8 p.m. On Wednesday as well as Al-Hilal Oumdurman, the game got pushed 24 hours, of course. CR Belouizdad Mamelodi Sundowns originally supposed to take place on Tuesday. Al-Hilal Oumdurman are going to be facing Mazembe in Oumdurman. TP Mazembe dropped 2 points. Should we say lost 2 points against Belouizdad in the first game at home, of course, with no crowds in their famously scary stadium, I would say. Not scary in terms of horror, but in terms of atmosphere, just so intense. It really puts a lot of nerves to any club that comes there. Belouizdad got glorious 2 points, I would say, against Mazembe, and they also had chances to go with the full 3 points out of that stadium. They couldn't quite do that. Mazembe didn't look super strong as I certainly expected them from the last decade or so in the Champions League. They didn't look as great in that first game. Going forward, in particular, they were pretty ineffective. They didn't do a lot in that game to upset the status. Belouizdad defended really well and kept the 2 points for themselves. So Mazembe now go to Al-Hilal Oumdurman, a side who come off of a disappointing loss against Mamelodi Sundowns in the first fixture. They looked for the equaliser, they get caught in the 90th minute, and they couldn't bring home even 1 point of that game. So I think it will be Oumdurman trying to go forward a little bit more, looking for that first victory. They're certainly not a lightweight, sorry. They certainly a favourite in this group, maybe to take a second place behind Mazembe, who knows. The pecking order of this group is not exactly clear over the first round, but I'm assuming that Mazembe are going to be, top favourites to top that group. Mamelodi Sundowns somewhere in there second. Belouizdad and Oumdurman fighting off who's going to be the better of the two. I reckon it's going to be, from what I judged in the early goings in the first fixture, probably it will be CR Belouizdad. They're not doing exactly well in the Algerian League, but they will be probably doing fine at the Champions League. Maybe there would be one of the cases where the local or the league form is going to be different to the Champions League form. And speaking of them, of course, they face Mamelodi Sundowns in Tanzania, as I mentioned. The game is going to get pushed to a neutral venue for a reason, for obvious reason again. COVID restrictions and what have you. So in the first fixture, as I mentioned, CR Belouizdad got important point against Mazembe, and probably it will be important in the later stages of the Champions League, of the group stage, where they get to decide who's going to be going first and second. Maybe it will help them. They have Mamelodi Sundowns. It's not exactly a home advantage in any way, shape or form. Like, if that game was played in a near country, in Morocco, in Tunisia, I think I would say yes, kind of advantage for them. But this game is going to be played in Tanzania. It's pretty much like a Champions League final being played in a different place completely. So that is not a home advantage in any way, shape or form. If anything, it will be more of an advantage to Sundowns, who's not going to be having to make a longer trip to Algeria and to exhaust themselves on a flight, 13 hours flight or what have you. So that might make Mamelodi Sundowns feel a little bit fresher, not travelling too far after the first game. For Belouizdad, it's all about the physicality. Can they keep the momentum? Can they keep the physical level for them? Can they keep the stamina going for them until the 90 minutes? Because if Mamelodi Sundowns have one thing up front, is pace and stamina. So they might hit them when they are physically exhausted after 75, 80, 85 minutes. It could really happen. And I assume that Sundowns will try and strike quickly while the iron is hot. If they have any chance of scoring, they will try not to miss it at the very best. Of course, a 2-0 victory against Al-Ahly Oumdurman in the first fixture is pretty good entering into this round, and they will surely try and go a little bit quicker and try to make this game more comfortable than the first one, because certainly it was a bit nervous in the second half. Sundowns, of course, top of the group, entering this fixture. Belouizdad second, as well as Mazembe with 1 point, of course, and Al-Ahly Oumdurman with 0 points at the bottom of that group. From Group B and to Group C, one match is going to be played in Group C, really. Atletico Petroleos de Luanda, or Petro Atletico as they are shortly called, are not going to be playing Wydad Casablanca because of COVID restrictions again in Morocco and in the countries that are affected by the second string of the COVID-19 pandemic. Angola, South Africa, Botswana, those kind of countries in the southern regions of Africa. So it's going to be only Kaizer Chiefs versus Horoya Conakry. That is the only game that's going to be taking place, and it's going to be taking place on Tuesday. Of course, Horoya Conakry entered this game with an important, huge 3 points after defeating Petro Atletico. I mean, not just in any place, defeating them at home, of course, in Conakry in the first game. Horoya, I mean, they were the better side in that first game, clearly. No doubts about it. They were the better side against Petro Atletico. They deservedly won that game. Not by the biggest of margins again, but still, they defeated, they managed to defeat Petro Atletico at home in that first game. Of course, with Wydad not going to be playing also in this fixture, with the first game already being postponed or rescheduled against Kaizer Chiefs from South Africa, you don't know exactly how the situation is going to be played out in that game. In my opinion, this group, Wydad are going to be the favourites to go through, probably. It might look like an easy group, but a tricky one for Wydad if they don't, play their cards right. Horoya, again, defeating Petro Atletico 2-0 at home, a 10-man Petro Atletico, of course, and this will, transition them nicely, I think, to a second game against Kaizer Chiefs, who didn't play their first. They might be fresher physically than Horoya. Also, the South African League isn't exactly deep into its season, so that might help as well physically. It's going to be a tricky one. As for Wydad Athletic, of course, I wrongly said that the game again is going to be postponed. It's not going to be postponed. It's going to be played, in fact, on Tuesday. They chose also a neutral venue to play there, and this is going to be their first game. Hopefully, they will manage a victory and manage something decent. I mean, they enter this competition again as favourites to win, one of the favourites to win, and hopefully they will get a decent result out of it. Of course, with one match played, with the sort of confusion of scheduling in this group, Horoya top with 3 points, Kaizer Chiefs and Wydad didn't play, so 0 points, and Petro Atletico automatically go bottom of the table with 0 points as well. There's 4 groups in this competition, so rounding off with Group D, I think the most intriguing group in the competition, and a group that, has my personal interest because I support one of its components. Esperance de Tunis face MC Algiers away from home, and Tenguith, of course, host Zamalek SC, the runners-up of the last editions, and certainly after the first game between Esperance and Tenerife, it didn't exactly fill me with the biggest of hope for the rest of the season. I mean, the game wasn't exactly comfortable. It was really, really nervous. Of course, Tenerife went ahead 1-0 at half 1-0 at half an hour into the game. Then, of course, Esperance equalised in the later stages of the first half, and it was hard to score the second goal. It needed a serious shot in the arm, with Khalidou Basit Abdul scoring his first goal for the team and first Champions League goal on his debut in the Champions League against Tenerife. A beautiful head, of course, making it 2-1. Esperance maybe enter this game top of the group with a win in their pockets, but certainly not in any way, shape or form favourites to win this one. MC Algiers, I watched most of their game against Zamalek. I watched around 60 to 65 minutes. They play well defensively. They use a similar form to Atalanta, as I mentioned in the previous couple of episodes. 3-4-2-1 kind of formation, crowding out the midfield with players. They don't have exactly the base to attack, but they have some technical players. Of course, Bilal Bin Saha, former player of Esperance Tunis, is going to MC Algiers and delivering, playing really well there. Probably being their best player so far, and certainly their best player against Zamalek, who were better than MC Algiers in that first game. Definitely a game that is going to be interesting, nervous, hard, because of course of the restrictions of the COVID-19 situation. Belouizdad are not going to be playing in Algiers. Supposedly the stadium, the 5th of July stadium, was supposed to host both games on one day, but because of the COVID restrictions, the other game that will be played in that stadium was moved to a different stadium, but that's a different discussion. Again, as I mentioned, MC Algiers played with 3-4-2-1. They crowd out the midfield, so if anything, this is going to be troubling Esperance Tunis players and the wingers in particular, who like some space to play into, who likes a lot of room to move and to run and to play crosses inside. So I think the coach should come with new ways now to try and unlock the defense, because I doubt they will play as defensive or as conservative as they are against Zamalek, because that game was away and they know they have the home advantage, so probably they will try and be a little bit upfront. So that is going to demand, the classic, hold them up for the first 15-20 minutes, absorb the pressure, and then bit by bit get into the game. But I reckon Esperance Tunis, from what I saw in the last couple of years in Africa, they play better when they play away from home, when they don't have that pressure, on their shoulders. So I reckon they're going to deliver a good game. Maybe they even could win away from home, who knows. I certainly have them as second placed behind Zamalek, to be fair. I'm not enjoying their performances too much this season, but, I still believe in them as a strong favourites, and one of the strong favourites to win that competition behind Zamalek in this group, at least. And speaking of Zamalek, of course, they have a tricky, and I mean a tricky, trip to Senegal to face Tenerife. It's not going to be the easiest of flights for them, not the easiest of trips. The first game wasn't exactly comfortable, and the league, of course, is wrapping up in Egypt, so it's not exactly the most comfortable of schedules for them. But the first game against MC Algiers, if it gave us anything, it showed us the bad side of Zamalek, the Zamalek that could be really slow sometimes and not effective in terms of finishing. Of course, certainly losing a player like Mustafa Mohamed, who went to Galatasaray on a transfer a couple of weeks ago, is not helping in any way. They don't have a proper replacement in that centre forward position, and they have maybe wingers going to be doing the position, but it doesn't look like they will find their footing just yet, because if they had someone like him up front, probably they would finish the couple of chances that they had against MC Algiers. This is going to be a tough game against Tenerife, a side that can bounce on spaces. Zamalek are a tight side, they don't give too much spaces, but if it happens by any chance, the players of Tenerife, I think they're quite more than ready to run into those spaces and to absorb a lot of pressure that they're going to be, exposed at expectedly against Zamalek side. Particularly the left-hand side, I think, for Zamalek is not exactly strong. So if you put some of the pacey players that Tenerife have, and they have some pacey players up front, it could really be a hard game for the runners-up of the last competition. I still believe that they will go through as top of the group, ahead of Esperance, the team that I support, which is going to be sounding like a wild opinion, but I really believe that they could finish the job. I mean, it's going to be hard, but I doubt that Tungiz are going to have too much to upset Zamalek in that match. Certainly entering this group, of course, the standings as it stands, it is Esperance Tunis at the top 3 points, MCLJ 1 point, Zamalek 1 point as well, and Tungiz with 0 points at the very bottom. That's it for me for this episode. Thank you for watching / listening. Hopefully I'm going to be back on Thursday to do a review of this second round of this Champions League in Africa. And until that, follow us on social media, PSP on Twitter, Pitch Side Pod on Instagram, like, share, comment on the YouTube version, of course, of this, and subscribe to the channel. And we are available on Spotify, Google Podcasts. Listen to us there. And, I will see you soon. Goodbye, and until next time, behave and be safe and take care of yourselves. Goodbye.